Hey everybody, Dr. John LaBrie here, and welcome to my squat basics video. The purpose of this video is threefold. First part is I want to teach you guys how to do a proper squat, so looking at the basics of proper squat mechanics. The second thing is to help you determine what your starting point is. Not everybody's going to be able to do a full squat off the hop, and that's totally fine. So during this video, I'm going to be demonstrating different modifications that you can use based on where your current level of function is. The third thing is I'm also going to be giving you a path that you can take to help you develop your squat and enhance it from wherever you are to ultimately being able to do a full squat. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is demonstrate what a proper squat looks like. Okay, so I'll show you from the front and then we'll do it from the side. The first thing that we want to do is have our feet about shoulder width apart, or even a little bit outside of that is okay. And you can have your feet either facing straight forward or angled about 10 degrees out to the side, okay? Now with this position, you're going to engage your butt muscles, your glutes, as well as your abdominal muscles to protect your core. And at this point in time, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna screw my feet into the floor. And the way that we do that, the left foot's gonna go counterclockwise, right foot's gonna go clockwise. And as I do that, my feet aren't actually going to go out like this, but what they are gonna do is essentially kind of grip the floor, right? So it gives me a more solid foundation to do the squat on. The next thing I'm gonna do is make sure that my head, shoulders, and pelvis, my hips are all facing forward. We're not twisting or anything like that. And then I'm going to stabilize my upper back by bringing my arms up and bringing my shoulders backwards and down. Now we're ready to start the squat. To engage in the squat movement, the first thing that's gonna happen is your butt is going to go backwards. And as you do that, and as you start to drop down further and further, your knees should start to go outwards. You should feel most of the weight going towards the back half of your feet. And you're gonna continue going down, keeping your spine upwards. Eventually, you should be able to get to a point where your hip crease, your hips should be at or below your knee level, okay? Now, to reverse, to stand back up, you essentially undo everything that you just did. You're gonna keep everything solid and engaged. You're gonna slowly come back up, let your knees gradually come back to center, and you're gonna be standing up nice and straight, okay? Now, we'll demonstrate this from the side just so you see what exactly is happening, especially with that first step in engaging with the squat. So my feet are ready, they're about 10 degrees out. I'm screwing them into the floor. I'm engaging my butt muscles and my abdominal muscles, keeping them tight. I'm gonna be, every part of my body is facing forward. Arms are up, shoulders are back and down. And now as I drop down into the squat, my knees are gonna go outwards. But the first thing you're going to see is my butt is going to go back. That is the very first part of the squat. That allows me to drop down, my knees to go outwards, and it eventually gets me to a point where you can probably see my hip crease is below my knee, and everything in this position is in what's called a solid state. Everything is happy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to eventually go back up. Reversing everything that we just did, coming all the way back up to the top. So something I can't overemphasize enough is the fact that form is very important when you're squatting. It can, if you lose proper form during your squat, it can turn this very healthy movement pattern into a very unhealthy movement pattern pretty quickly. Squat analysis can get pretty complicated when we're looking at proper mechanics of a squat because there's so many joints and muscles involved. But here are 4 major points to watch out for while you're doing your squat at home, or maybe even have a partner watch you, spot you to make sure that you're not doing any of these faults. So the first one is when we are dropping down into our squat. Again, if you remember, the first step is that bum needs to come back, right? After we've gotten everything set up, core's engaged and whatnot, spine is steady and ready, the first step should be that bum should come back. A common fault, however, is instead of doing this, people tend to do this, all right? What they do is they increase the curve in their low back, and the problem with that is it starts to set your spine up for shear stress as you go through the movement. So obviously we want to avoid that as much as we can. The next thing is that as you're dropping down towards the bottom of your squat, we want to make sure that your knees are staying behind your toes, okay? And so as we go, we want to make sure that would essentially mean that your shins are almost vertical, all right? The movement fault is that some people tend to do something like this. And again, this is very unhealthy for your knees. They don't like that at all. Puts a lot of extra strain on them. And so watch for that, and if you can, see if you can position yourself further back so that you're no longer in front of your toes. Now, the third thing to watch out for is as you're dropping down into that squat, we want to make sure that our knees are going outwards, all right? So again, looks like that. A thing that a lot of people tend to do is they tend to have their knees go inwards, all right? So as we're going down, sometimes people do this, or they might do some version of bringing their knee inward like that. And the problem is that creates a lot of shear stress in your knees. And if you've ever heard of a ligament called your ACL ligament, that can actually create a lot of strain on that ligament itself. So definitely want to avoid that as well. The last thing that I'm going to demonstrate for you is looking for loss of spinal neutrality or neutral spinal positioning during this movement. So what that looks like is from the side, we want to make sure that as we drop down, again, keeping everything from our spine nice and straight. And that would be ideal for our spine, everything would be happy. But a common fault, and this is probably one of the most common faults we see, is that people tend to do this as they drop down. They kind of go down like that. So obviously that creates some pressure and strain on your spine. The other one is that as they get down towards the bottom part, their low back tends to round out like this instead of keeping it nice and straight. Again, setting yourself up for disc injury if you make sure that that is all aligned properly. Now, if you notice any of these faults and you can't correct them on your own, or if your body's too stiff or not comfortable doing this, that's okay. Check out the following modifications to see where you fit and what works best for you. So the first progression we're going to do, the first modification I'm going to show you is a quarter squat. And essentially for this, what we're going to do is we're going to have a target, we'll call it, that's slightly higher than a normal chair height, and like the arm of a couch or a low table or something to that effect, or if you have a chair that you can raise up or down like a bar stool, that would work perfectly as well. And so for this, ideally it's just below your hip height, kind of like this one is here, and everything else is the exact same. In terms of setup for the squat, you're going to be starting with your feet about shoulder width apart or just outside, 10 degrees angled outwards. I'm going to engage my butt muscles and my core muscles, my abdominal muscles. I'm going to be bringing my arms up, my shoulders back and down to stabilize my upper spine. And then my butt is going to go back first, and I'm just going to go down until my bum touches the seat. And then I'm going to come back up, reversing all of that. And then I can do that again, holding everything steady, bringing it back down, and then coming back up. The next progression is the supported half squat. For this squat, we're going to be using a chair or target that is right around knee height, and ultimately the goal is for it to be able to provide you with the ability to squat down to just shy of 90-degree knee flexion, okay? And so to demonstrate with this, everything else is the exact same in terms of setup with the normal squat. Feet shoulder width apart, 10 degrees out, engaging my bum muscles, my core, my abdominal muscles, bringing my arms up. I'm going to slowly start to engage my bum and push it backwards. And as I do that, my knees are going out, and I'm going to drop all the way down until my bum reaches the target, and then I'm going to come back up. I'll do that again. This next progression is essentially the same as the last one. This is the unsupported half squat, and really the biggest difference here is that you're not going to have a target for your bum to kind of rest on towards the bottom of that squat. Again, the same target, same goal for you is going to be to get close to 90-degree knee flexion, only this time without something to support you at that bottom. So just to demonstrate that, everything will be the same for setup with your feet. Engage the core, bring the arms up to support the upper back, bum back, dropping down right to about 90 degrees, and then coming back up. Make sure as you're doing this and as you progress to this movement that as you go down, you're not getting to a point where you're rounding your upper back forward. Try to keep everything up and stable and dropping down to about 90 degrees and then coming back up. So the final progression is essentially just taking what you've done to this point and moving it to at least 90-degree knee flexion or even beyond. So it's essentially getting to a full squat. And so what that looks like from the side is, again, like we've demonstrated before, everything is engaged, you're ready to go. You start with the bum going back, knees go out, you slowly drop down, and eventually you should get to a point where you can start to go at 90 degrees and then gradually dropping below, to the point where your hip crease should be below your knees, and that would be a full squat. Now, it's very important to check in with yourself or have somebody watch you to make sure that as you do this, that you're not falling into those movement faults that we were talking about earlier. Now, over time, you should be able to move from one modified squat to the next and eventually get to the point where you can do a full squat. It may not seem possible at this point, but I'm willing to bet that you would be pleasantly surprised if you put in the time and energy necessary in order to work on this movement. And eventually, I think it's very possible that you could get to a point where you can do a full squat. So you've learned how to squat as well as how to get to a full squat if you're not quite there yet. The big question now is, now what? Well, you can do a few different things. One of them is you can start a 30-day challenge, which there's tons of different options out there on the internet, where essentially for 30 days you are working on mastering and enhancing your ability to squat. You could also set up a work challenge, maybe even with some of your coworkers, where every hour you get up and you do 10 squats, which can actually be a great way to help undo some of the stresses and strains on our body from sitting for so long during the day. You could also take these squats and incorporate them into a home-based exercise program along with push-ups and sit-ups for that matter. The last thing is you could also take this and say if you're already doing squats in the gym, you can just use some of these tidbits to make sure that you're using and engaging in proper form to minimize your chance of injury. And finally, one of the biggest things is that you can use this to make sure that when you're lifting something off the floor, you're using proper lifting technique rather than just bending at the waist and risking injuring your low back. Now, if you have any challenges during this process, or if you need any help troubleshooting with some certain mobility issues, by all means, ask when you're in the office or send me a Facebook message and I'll be more than happy to see how I can help you out. Until next time, I wish you nothing but health and happiness. Happy squatting.